So for a few days now, we have been discussing this practice of the confession of downfall, which is also referred to as the seven limbs. So within the confession of downfalls, we say that we find all seven limbs present, but of course, the majority of the text is dedicated to confession of downfalls and negativities. In terms of the seven limbs that we need to understand, if we look at the presentation, the outlines according to the Lamrim or other similar texts, we will see that is talking about accumulation and purification. And this can be seen like in a long term. The long-term result of this is to reach the ground of Buddhahood. However, it can also be seen on an immediate scope, sort of like in terms of everyday practice. And in terms of everyday practice, we engage in various activities that you would say they fall into categories. One is the category of accumulating virtue, and the other one is the category of abandoning negativities. Now, obviously, accumulation and purification is going to vary. It depends for how long you do it. It depends how deeply you do it. It depends how profound how dedicated you to the practice, and so on and so forth. So, of course, there will be differences in the different levels of accumulation and purification. However, when all the parts are fully present there, and only then we talk about having the seven limbs. So when we talk about the seven limbs, this expression obviously brings to mind the different limbs of the body. However, these seven limbs are different from the limbs of the body in the sense that each one of them is extremely important. Each one of them is indispensable. Even if one is missing, then you could not say that you have the complete practice. Therefore, it's not like the parts of the body, because in terms of the parts of the body, one part could be missing, or some part is considered to be secondary and other parts are main. But with the seven limbs, each one of those limbs is very important, equally important, and indispensable. Okay, so we say that if we actually engage in the four limbs, the complete set of the four limbs, eventually we establish a field of accumulation when we do this practice. So in the confession of downfalls, when we look to identify the seven limbs, the first one that we mention is prostration. So this is obviously there. The second one is making offerings. And in this particular text, we do not have any words that correspond to the practice of offerings. However, the practice of offerings becomes very important. As J. Rinpoche says, in order to internally change my mind, I continuously make offerings to the three jewels. And what J. Rinpoche implies in this verse is that there is virtue that is created on the basis of a field of accumulation. And what he's referring here to is the field of accumulation that we establish in front of us. So in this particular practice, we visualize the 35 Buddhas. And then in their presence or in relation to them, we engage in different activities. And in general, when we create virtue, it is very important, first of all, at the beginning to have the appropriate motivation. Then we have the time of application, which is the time where you're actually carrying out the activity, and you must be focused and dedicated when you carry this. And at the end, you must have the dedication and the prayers. So when all of those three are present, then the virtue that you create is substantial. It is quite extensive. It is very powerful. It becomes the cause for liberation, and it becomes the cause of enlightenment. Otherwise, in general, there can be virtue. Like as you're going around through samsaric existence, there is opportunity here and there to create virtue. But if you don't have those three aspects present, all of them present, then that type of virtue will be very weak. But what we're saying here is that there is virtue that we can create in relation to the field of accumulation. And so, as we say here, the 35 Buddhas, or in front of you, if you have a statue, if you have a tanka, any representation of the Buddha, and so forth. So, even if you don't have the right motivation or the complete three sets, due to the power of the field of accumulation, you create virtue if you engage in practices. So sometimes we look at a statue and we think, yes, okay, this statue was just made by the statue maker, or this tanka was simply painted by the tanka painter, and this is all. However, it is not just that. When you have a statue, when you have a tanka, and so forth, you should understand that these objects are objects that carry a great amount of blessing, and they become special bases for our accumulation and our purification. The reason for that is because they have the support of all the Buddhas inside them. And when we say they have the support, what we mean by that is that for a being who practices, in order to become a Buddha, they must engage in practices for 3 countless great eons. So they have this tremendous accumulation. They have this tremendous power of purification. They have made many aspirational prayers. And all of this, they have not made for the sake of themselves, just to benefit themselves, but they did all those practices and they did all those prayers in order to benefit others. And therefore, when you have a statue or when you have a tanka, it is pervaded, or in a sense, you could say it has the support. It is supported by this incredible accumulation and prayers of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And therefore, even if you do not have a specific motivation, when you do things in relation to these objects, so even just seeing a statue, or even just possessing a tanka, or prostrating in front of them, or making offerings in front of them, or looking at them and rejoicing, and so forth, right? This has the power to create virtue that becomes the cause for liberation from samsara. And we can understand this through the story that we mentioned before. This monk who became ordained at a very old age because at some previous life, he happened to be an insect who was on a leaf, and the leaf was carried around the stupa, and unintentionally, without the motivation, circumambulated the stupa. So we talk about the field of accumulation and making offerings towards the field of accumulation. Now, here to explain the meaning of offering, we can go into the Sanskrit word for offering, and the Sanskrit word for that is puja. And puja actually means to please the mind. There are different types of offerings, so there are different ways in which we can please the mind. And in particular, in Tantra, you can hear about many different categories of offerings. However, to simplify it, we can summarize it down into 2 categories. One of them is material offerings, and the other one is the offering of practice. Another way of referring to them is that the first category is surpassable offerings, and the second one is unsurpassable offerings. So when we compare these two categories, material offerings and offerings of practice, the offering of practice is more important. It is more important because it pleases the minds of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas more than material offerings please them. So it is similar to a situation where you have parents that have children and they have great affection for their children. And I imagine that the children also are loving and caring children. And occasionally they make little presents to the parents, or they serve the parents, they help the parents, and so forth. So obviously, the parents will be pleased when the children come to them with presents or serve them or respect them and so on and so forth. But what will please the parents most of all is when they see their children conducting themselves or behaving themselves or working in a proper manner. So, in a similar way, here we say that the most important offerings are the offerings of practice. And in the Confession of Downfalls, we make the offering of practice when we recite the names of the 35 Tathagatas and make prostrations. So we make offerings. So, when we talk about the offering of practice, we have to understand that the offering of practice comes during different stages of our development as practitioners. So initially, when we are beginners, there is a time where we have not actually started practicing yet. And when we are at this phase of beginners, the offering of practice is to actually listening very carefully to the instruction that we receive from our teachers and our spiritual friends. Then later on, we come closer to the period of beginning the practice. But even before we begin the practice, before we're actually doing any serious practice, we're at the phase where we are trying to engage the practice. And it is very important at this phase, even if you're not successful in your practice, if you cannot practice the things that you aspire to do, to always make prayers and always have the hope and the aspiration that you will do those practices. Actually, it's very important never to lose your hope that you will do this practice. So here we're talking about the practice of offerings such as meditating on bodhicitta, meditation on emptiness, and things like that. As the great Yogi Milarepa said, I have nothing material to present as offering. However, I make the supreme offering to my guru. And with that, he indicated that although he didn't have any material possessions, through his practice, he pleased the mind of the guru. He made the supreme offering. So here, what happens, for example, when we do the confession of downfalls and when we do prostrations and so forth, we imagine that any virtue we created in the past, that which we are creating right now are present, and the ones that we will create in the future, we gather all this, we accumulate all this, and then we imagine that our virtue takes on the aspect of some very pleasant, different types of offerings. And then we say, I offer all this. In reality, if we look in what happens in 24 hours, the majority of our activities are not virtuous activities. The majority of time, our activities are non-virtuous or neutral. So when we come to the very, very rare and short time where we actually do something virtuous, then this is the time where we please the Buddhas and the Gurus the most, because most of the time we don't do any virtue. So, as it was the question before, when we do something virtuous, even if it is small, even if it is weak virtue, this is actually our offering. We should make this offering practice or offering of virtue as we are prostrating or we engage this practice according to our capacity. So when we revisit that verse by Rinpoche, we understand it better what it says, because it says the power of your mind improves from the virtue that you create in relation to the minds of the field of accumulation. Therefore, you should always continuously accumulate this type of virtue. So he's talking about virtue that we accumulate in relation to the field of accumulation. So in the presence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so forth, any virtue that we can accumulate by prostrating, confessing negativity, making offerings, offering a butter lamp, whatever we can do, this is something that helps us on a daily basis. It's something we should do continuously, uninterruptedly, every day, because it has great benefit. What it does, it changes our mind. And changes our mind here, it means it improves our mind, so that eventually we will come to the point where the mind has the capacity to do profound and difficult practices. So from amongst the 7 limbs, we have obviously explained the first one, which is prostrating, the second one, which is making offering, the third one, which is confession of negativity. And now we come to the fourth one, which is rejoicing. Rejoicing is very important because rejoicing, in a sense, is the easiest practice that we can do. Kongtang Rinpoche said, once I'm relaxed, I am rejoicing in any great virtue that I happen to know, to observe. So what is the meaning of rejoicing? Rejoicing is liking virtue, and whether it is virtue that you yourself have made or virtue that is created by others. So, for example, you might come to hear or to know that someone has made a lot of prostrations or is very good at the practice of prostrations, and you just say, oh, how good they have made this great practice of prostrations. So you're rejoicing in this virtue. Rejoicing or liking virtue, especially the virtue of others, is very important, because usually we have the tendency to generate jealousy and be very competitive towards others. And this type of attitudes can harm others, but mainly and for sure they harm ourselves. So for immediately, they destroy our happiness, but also in the future, they make us create negativity and they reduce the amount of virtue that we are able to establish. And therefore, if we can rejoice instead of being jealous, this is very good. So when we rejoice, well, as we said, we can rejoice in the virtue of others and in our own virtue. The benefits of rejoicing in the virtue of others are explained as follows. For example, if you rejoice in the virtue of someone who is much more developed than yourself, let's say a bodhisattva, so when you rejoice in their activities, you create virtue that is at least half the virtue that they have created. If you rejoice on the activities, virtuous activities of someone who is more or less the same level with yourself, you accumulate the same amount of virtue. And if you rejoice in the virtue of someone who does not have the same intellectual capacity with you, someone who has less capacity than yourself. However, if you rejoice in their virtue, you also gain a portion of that virtue as well. And therefore, it is very beneficial to rejoice in the virtue of others. Also, as we say, it's very important to rejoice in your own virtue. So it's very good to take the time to contemplate what type of virtues I have created since I was, in this life, since I was a little kid. And sometimes we think that that this only includes, strictly speaking, Dharma virtues. For example, what teachings have I, what virtue are created by attending teachings, or by making pujas, or by making offerings, by making my prayers, and so forth. But it is not exhausted just in that. It also includes any good activity, anything good, anything we have done, let's say as little kids, to help someone else, to benefit someone else. All of this is virtue. So we can rejoice in all the virtue we have created in this life. When we rejoice in our own virtue, we have to be very careful not to generate pride. It's easy to think of your virtue and then become very proud of that. As Lama Tsongkhapa has said, as I rejoice in my past virtue without being affected with pride, that joy causes my virtue to increase. There was a king at the time of the Buddha, and he asked the Buddha the following question: whilst I'm very busy in activities that I have, that are my responsibility in terms of protecting the country, what is the best Dharma practice to do? And the Buddha gave this reply. Number 1, you rejoice. Number 2, you meditate on bodhicitta. Number 3, you do dedication prayers. So first of all, it says rejoice. Rejoice in the activities of others, activities of bodhisattvas, and so forth. That is an easy practice. No matter how busy you are with the affairs of the country, you can still find the time to rejoice. The second one, it says meditate on bodhicitta, and that might seem like it's a very difficult ask to do, because fully qualified bodhicitta is something which is very difficult to generate. However, at the level that we are, nevertheless, we can cultivate, or we can expand the mind or the thought that is always thinking something nice about others. So thinking good about others, thinking how to benefit others, becomes the seed that eventually will lead to the development of bodhicitta. So at the level that we are, we can do that. And the third practice is to do dedication prayers. And therefore you can see that no matter how busy that king was, governing the country, still he could easily do those three practices. Those practices are easy to do, and at the same time, they guarantee a vast accumulation of merit and virtue. As they were relevant back then at the time of the Buddha, they are also very relevant today in our very busy lives. So within the 24 hours of the day, definitely we can find time to fit in these three easy practices. Okay, so Rinpoche was saying, since we mentioned here the second advice was to meditate on bodhicitta, Rinpoche said, I remember something that I wanted to say before. Imagine that you have an ambassador that represents a country. So when this ambassador comes into an assembly and he or she talks, they represent their country. And in a sense, because they are sent by the country as their ambassador, they have the support of the country. And therefore, their speech is very important. The speech of an ambassador has a certain weight. Our speech, because we are ordinary beings, our speech does not carry this type of weight. But this ambassador represents the entire country, and the entire country is behind him or behind her. So if we actually treat this ambassador with courtesy and politeness and respect, we are actually treating the country they represent with politeness and respect. And if we mistreat the ambassador, we're actually mistreating and insulting the entire country. So Rinpoche was saying, I'm saying this, I'm bringing this example because I want to talk about bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas, in a sense, are like the ambassadors of all sentient beings, because everything they do it for the sake of those sentient beings. And therefore, um, when we talk about at the beginning, we talked about virtue you accumulate according to the power of the field of accumulation. It actually comes down from this particular point. They represent all sentient beings and they work for the sake of all sentient beings. And therefore, bodhisattvas have special power. And since they train over 3 countless great eons, during that incredibly long duration of time, through their practices, their power increases more and more. So at the end, they reach the state of Buddhahood. And this is why we say that any representation of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind is something which is very powerful, because it has this great supporting power behind it. And the reason is that for those beings to become Buddhas, they have always continuously meditated on bodhicitta for 3 countless eons. Okay, so this explains the point of how powerful it is to accumulate virtue in front of these objects. All right, so from our side, perhaps we have the motivation in place. So let's say we contemplate bodhicitta, or we think about refuge, then we carry out the activity, and then at the end we also do a dedication towards omniscience or towards the benefit of all sentient beings. So if we do like this, then this is the means for accumulating great merit. So we have explained the limb of rejoicing, and then we have the following 2, which is requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma and requesting not to pass into paranirvana. Requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, it's another expression that means requesting for teachings. And of course, actually requesting for teachings creates a great accumulation of merit. But requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma is not just requesting for teaching. It's not just that. And especially when we do the practice of the confession of downfalls, we have to imagine that when we request the 35 Buddhas to turn the wheel of Dharma, they also accept our request. It is very important to make the request for teachings, because it helps us overcome the very grave fault of abandoning the Dharma. We have explained that abandoning the Dharma doesn't just mean that you turn your back to the Dharma. It actually means you can treat, it happens when you treat disrespectfully those who have faith in the Dharma and work for the Dharma. And also it occurs when you start making distinctions between our Dharma and their Dharma, and thinking our Dharma is better, their Dharma is inferior, or our monastery and their monastery, and our monastery is better, theirs is not so good, and so forth. So any such actions constitute the very big negativity of abandoning the Dharma. Actually, when the Dharma is genuine, it is traced back to our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. So all genuine Dharma is traced back to Buddha Shakyamuni, right? Therefore, there is no grounds for making these distinctions, ours and theirs, and we are better than they are. So if the Dharma is not genuine, then this is another case. But if it is genuine, there's no grounds for discrimination. All right, so we see that any main practice that we do, whether it is the confession of negativity, whether it is Gandhar Lagyama, whether it is Lama Chöpa, it actually has all those 7 limbs. The 7 limbs are very important, and they appear in all the practices. So, for example, in Gandhar Lagyama, when you start, you have a couple of verses where you invite the objects of the recipients of your practice to appear. And then for each one of the 7 limbs, we have one verse. And by the time you finish doing this, basically you come to the end of the practice of Gandha Lagema. Okay, so the next one is the requesting not to pass into paranirvana. So in terms of the actual practice that we do in the Dhamma centers is offering a long life puja. So this is quite a common practice. And with this particular request, we are requesting, let's say, the gurus, the lamas, and so forth, to remain and continue to strive to make sure that the Buddhist teachings proliferate in this world, and that they also remain and continue to strive to bring about the benefit of sentient beings. This type of requests can be done either directly in front, in the presence of a lama who is sitting in the throne in front of you, or you can have the visualization of the field of merit, the field of accumulation, and in your mind you make this prayer and you make the request to please not to pass into paranirvana, so meaning to remain alive and continue working for the benefit of teachings and sentient beings. And as with the previous limb, which was to the request to turn the wheel of Dharma, here also we have to imagine that, let's say, the 35 Buddhas or whoever you are requesting is very happily accepting your request. So they say that offering the long life prayer or offering making the request of the gurus not to pass into paranirvana becomes the best practice for making your own life longer. And the reason for that is because when the Buddhist teachings remain stable for a long life, for a very long time in this world, then there is great benefit that comes to sentient beings. However, if the Buddhist teachings do not remain, they don't remain for a long time, or they are unstable, then many calamities and a lot of suffering comes to sentient beings. Therefore, whichever way you look at it, whether it is from the general benefit or whether you look at it as a private, what would be most beneficial for you personally, there is great, all the advantages come from the teachings remaining for a very long time. And for the teachings to remain for a very long time, we must have teachers. The teachers have to come and they have to engage in these activities of turning the wheel of Dharma and having a long life, working for our benefit and the benefit of the teachings. So here, of course, when we do the practice of the confession of downfalls, the field of merit in front of us are the 35 Buddhas. And the 35 Buddhas, being Buddhas, they do not pass away. They do not pass into paranirvana. They just remain. However, we have to think that often the Buddhas take the aspect of ordinary beings, ordinary human beings, and they come amongst us to teach us and benefit us. And therefore, we have to request for those who take the human aspect that they remain, have very long lives and remain for a very long time. Okay, so with this, we have gone through all those limbs except the last one, which is the limb of dedication. But for the limb of dedication, the Sutra of the 3 Heaps has its own paragraph. It has its own words clearly. And he actually went to see His Holiness, and His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, said, well, you know what? You should go to Varanasi. At that time, the Varanasi, the university at Varanasi, there was the school there in the education a university in Varanasi. And he said, it would be very good if you went to Varanasi. And Dzong Rinpoche's immediate response was like, how can I go? How can I accept this? You know, these days my body is weak, my legs are not very stable, and you know, I shouldn't go there. So that was like, let's say, you know, that was the initial reaction in the initial the initial conversation. And then the next day or a couple of days later, he saw again His Holiness, and it became apparent how, it seemed that the more he taught, the more his body became more vigorous, and he was able, he had a very good physical appearance, he had very good stamina, he was able to do much more. And then at the same time, there was, around the same time, there was another great Lama, Jetsun Khalkha Rinpoche, who sent a letter to a written message to His Holiness. And he said, when would be the best time to pass away? Should I pass away this year? Or is it best if I pass away next year? And His Holiness replied, he said, no, don't pass away this year. It's best if you do it next year. And exactly as His Holiness had advised, the next year, that great Lama passed away. What does this story illustrate? It illustrates that those great Lamas, they're great beings, and they have perfect control over their bodies, over their life, over their death. And they will remain for as long as it is beneficial for sentient beings. And when it's not that beneficial, then they will depart. But they have perfect control. So these are not stories of very, very old, ancient stories. These are recent stories. So when we hear this story, first of all, the question of this Mongolian Lama Jetsun Khalkha Rinpoche, the question that he asked, and then the answer that His Holiness gave. I mean, these are very unusual questions, and these are very unusual answers for us ordinary beings. But this type of communication illustrates, as we say, that they have perfect control. And for every activity, they consider what will be the best benefit, the most benefit of sentient beings. And the second thing that the story illustrates is how important it is to practice exactly according to the instruction of your root guru. Okay, so if we want to identify the limbs, the 7 limbs in the actual sutra, we said that the limb of confession and making offerings is when we recite the names of the 35 Buddhas and make prostrations to them. Then if we go to, we're at the end of the sutra, where it says, just as the previous Buddhas, Bhagavans fully dedicated, and however those Buddhas, Bhagavans who have yet to come will fully dedicate. And however those Buddhas, Bhagavans who are present now fully dedicate, similarly, I also fully dedicate. So this is the dedication. Then after that, we have the words that say, I confess individually all negativity. So we have here just this very short sentence for confession, but obviously previously we had more elaborate passage for confessing, recognizing and confessing negativity. Then it says, I rejoice in all merit. So this is the limb of rejoicing. And then it says, I urge and request the Buddhas. The words I urge is I urge them to turn the wheel of Dharma. And I request the Buddhas not to pass into paranirvana. And then it says, may I attain supreme, immaculate, and unsurpassable pristine wisdom. So this is mind generation. It is the mind of bodhicitta, where we are aspiring and say, may I become a Buddha, may I have the pristine, unsurpassable, pristine wisdom of the Buddha for the sake of benefiting sentient beings. And the last words are words of refuge. To the conquerors who are supreme among humans, those who abide are present, those of the past, and those who are yet to come. So here we have the Buddhas of the 3 times, those of the present, those of the past, and those of the future. To all those who have limitless praised qualities like an ocean with folded hands, I fully go for refuge. So this concludes the Sutra of the 3 Heaps. Rinpoche has concluded the presentation. Okay, thank you. All right, so Rinpoche gave us here the lineage. First of all, he received the transmission of the confession to the 35 Buddhas from Sharpa Choche Rinpoche, and then in the monastery in the Great Assembly by Gen Kuntso Tsering. And later on, he received at Gyuto the extensive commentary 3 or 4 times from Gen Rinpoche Gedrum Losang. Okay, so this is the lineage, Rinpoche's lineage, and now we have just a little bit time left. We will begin with questions. We have received questions through the internet, so not on the floor, through the floor, not live questions, but internet questions. Okay. Okay, just one last remark. When Rinpoche was giving the explanation, he referred to the explanation where each one of the 35 Buddhas has its own posture and mudras and different colors. And this is according to the presentation we find in the Sutra and according to the description of J. Rinpoche. However, the easy way of practice is to visualize the 35 Buddhas in groups of 5, and each group has the attributes in terms of the hand mudras and the colors of one of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. So there is a difference between the extensive presentation that we have in the Sutra, where everybody has different color, and the visualization that is easier for our practice, just to give them the colors and the aspect of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. All right.
Okay, so thank you, Rinpoche, and thank you, Vola. So I'll be reading the questions that came through online. There's some questions which Rinpoche had already addressed and answered. For example, like if I do it on the bus or on the train, and if I recite the names of the 35 Buddhas with sincere regret, does it still carry the full purification power? I think Rinpoche already mentioned that it still has purification, but it is not as strong as if we were to do the in-depth practice, right? So we can review the past teachings to get the more in-depth answer. So I think there are 2 questions of the same nature which we would like to request Rinpoche to answer, which is the question 1, are there any outer or inner signs to know if purification has taken place? So this is very, very similar to the recent question we also received from Sim to ask about what are the signs to know if our negative karma has been fully purified. I read that we might have some dreams. Can Rinpoche please explain to us more? Thank you.
Okay, so obviously many sutras that present purification practices, such as purification practices related to Vajrasattva or purification practices related to the confession of the 35 Buddhas and so forth, they mention signs, and in particular, they mention different types of dreams that can be indicative of purification of our negativity. And also, J. Rinpoche lists a number of dreams that can be indicative of purification. And these dreams include vomiting and getting rid of some unclean substance or some sickness exiting from your body, or eating curd and milk or some delicious food. Dreaming of the sun and the moon bright in the sky, dreaming that you fly, you have the dream that you fly, or you dream a great number of ordained people or a monastery, and that there is Dharma activity, there is activity in the monastery, or many, monks and nuns are doing things. Another one is dreaming that you are ascending, such as climbing up a mountain or ascending onto a throne and things like that. So all of these are mentioned as good dreams that are signs of purification. However, the important thing to understand is that, of course, the nature of dreams is that, they are not very reliable things. And for those to become signs of purification, you should have reoccurring dreams, right? So it's not just that you had a good dream once. The dream has to repeat itself again and again. So it has to be reoccurring and stable. Then the other thing that we have to take into consideration when we examine dreams is the time they occur and our physical condition. What we mean by our physical condition is that, for example, when you are sick, the dreams that you have are disturbed and they're unreliable. So even if you have a good dream whilst you are sick, you have to discard that dream. Then, in terms of the time, if we take the duration of the evening and divide it into 3 sections, it is said that dreams that occur on the 3rd section, which is close to the morning, just before we wake up, these are the best, the most reliable dreams. However, in general, we should not put too much emphasis on the dreams and become overjoyed when good dreams occur or become devastated when bad dreams occur. Because if we have this reaction and we put so much emphasis on the dreams, this can become an obstacle to our Dharma practices. Okay. All right, so we talk a lot about dreams, but we shouldn't put our hopes on the dreams, right? The most important thing is to make sure that we properly rely on the 4 opponent powers. The Buddha himself has said that if the 4 opponent powers are complete, then purification will be complete. And therefore, this is where our emphasis should be. Instead of becoming obsessed with the dreams and following the dreams and examining the dreams, and I'm so happy I had a good dream, I'm devastated I didn't have a good dream, we should put our effort into the 4 opponent powers. If we know that, let's say, we have the correct motivation, we do the practice properly, and we do the dedication properly at the end, then even if a bad dream occurs, it doesn't count, because we should have the confidence to understand that purification occurs. Okay, so as the great Yogi Milarepa said, I don't trust the dreams. The dreams are lies. But if I pee myself during my sleep, the next morning I know that my clothes are wet. So Rinpoche would like to offer some last advice and remarks. He said he noticed there is a difference in the quality of the questions that you ask from the last time he was here to today. And actually, the questions have become more realistic. They reflect the difficulty that you have in your daily practice. They reflect how deeper the questions run in your mind. And therefore, this whole, the way that the questions have matured indicate how much interest you have for the practice of Dharma and how you come into the center, and this is meaningful for you. And therefore, Rinpoche says that judging from the questions, I see this as a very good sign, a very good indication of maturity overall, and therefore I'm very pleased with this. And I want to say that I have been here for the last 2 months, and in every aspect, I was very pleased and very happy during my stay. And I want to thank you for everything you have done. And now there is something that I really need to share with you. These days, amongst the monks in the monastery, whether we talk about those who travel abroad or those who stay in the monastery in India, the main topic of conversation is how much the center, the Singaporean center, is helping the monastery in terms of medical costs and all other, medical expenses. And this makes a tremendous difference. in general, the situation of the monks in the monastery has improved a lot over the years. There are no monks these days who are lacking food or any, basic provisions. There's no gaps in terms of these needs. However, sickness, and especially serious sickness, is something that occurs all the time. And we had this situation where a lot of monks would go to be examined. And when they get to the hospital, the doctor explains that there is something very serious with you. We have to intervene. It's a serious operation. The medication or the rehabilitation will cost that much or will go on for that long. And merely by hearing the cost of the medical treatment, there were so many monks who just gave up on the spot. And when you become discouraged and gave up, then you don't want to fight for your life anymore. But because the center has been so kind in providing the support covering the cost of medical expenses, this has made a tremendous difference in the monastery. And even when Khentul Rinpoche, Gyudo Khentul Rinpoche came and Khari Rinpoche went to see him, this was the main topic of their conversation. What a big difference it has made that you are supporting the monastery in terms of medical expenses of the monks. And, it is, and I cannot stress enough what a big accumulation of virtue, how virtuous it is that you're doing. And I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing. And I think the most important thing for this support to keep going is that we have a mutual understanding, and mutual understanding means we have a flow of communication between the center and the monastery. So this is what accounts for the excellent results that we have so far. So thank you very much.
Vola, you have to translate also.
Anyway, so Rinpoche was saying he had that very strong thought in the second class, and then he thought, I won't speak about it today because I will have time to speak about it at the very end, the last class. So Rinpoche wanted to say the difference a good translator makes. Because these days, actually, it is often the situation. There are lamas who make the effort to teach the Dharma, and there are students who make the effort to go and attend. But if between them they do not have a good translator, then a lot is getting lost. And this creates quite a problem, quite difficulty, both for the teacher and the students. So Rinpoche was saying that the center here is very fortunate, and he feels very pleased that you have a translator who has experience and is well prepared, and no matter what you throw at her, she can deal with it.
So thank you. I think since Rinpoche has said this, so we'll just finish this part first. So Rinpoche, thank you so much on behalf of all our friends. So Rinpoche, you also see that more and more students are coming to class, and that's because Rinpoche has given us the opportunity to attend classes, and this is Rinpoche's third trip to Singapore. And as always, is benefiting us in so many practical ways. So this time, Rinpoche has stayed for 2 months longer. It's double the time he was here the last 2 times. And Rinpoche was kept so busy throughout this trip. In the beginning, His Holiness' birthday. Then after that, the 48 Grand Puja. Then after that, teaching. Then after so many big puja in the center. And then, Song Rinpoche program also become your things. So Rinpoche was kept really busy and he maximized all his time in Singapore here. But it also maximized our time to be able to be with Rinpoche and with all the so many different aspects of interaction and engagement with Rinpoche that kept us really inspired. And through even many photos and videos, and through classes, we all get to see Rinpoche is both casual, relaxed, but serious at the same time, and serious with practice. So Rinpoche is really, really very sincere, and even those audience sessions that we have had with Rinpoche was also really beneficial for those who got to meet with Rinpoche. So we are very, very grateful and very privileged to be able to have Rinpoche here for the third time, even though he is really very, very busy back in the monastery and trusted with the major responsibilities of taking care, teaching and guiding the high Yangzi Rinpoches. Yeah, so we are thankful for the time that Rinpoche has made, especially to come here to benefit us. Yes, so thank you, Rinpoche, and we hope Rinpoche has a long life, and please come back again and again next year. So everybody is interesting, yeah? So you say yes, okay? Yeah, so now we do mandala, we thanks giving mandala, and also we request for the next year. Thank you very much. So, yeah, Rinpoche laughing is say yes. Also, Bola, I think Rinpoche Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you to the monks as well. So, Rinpoche, just to add on, we thank Rinpoche. We thank Rinpoche because Rinpoche, your teachings is so practical. You can hear right from the teachings. Rinpoche gives very, very meticulous, very practical, close to heart kind of advice, which makes it very actionable for us. So we want to thank Rinpoche, and this Saturday, Rinpoche is going back. Yes. So we hope, Rinpoche, you continue to think of us in Singapore. Now we are going to give Rinpoche a thank you and like a farewell. Yeah, thank you. So, Rinpoche, this is specially for you. This is a mango lassi cake. Hey, yeah, mango lassi cake. Thank you, Khari Rinpoche. And also, so this is our, yeah, oh, yeah. She say she want to, then Rinpoche, you picture here, yeah. Yeah, mango lassi, our first mango lassi cake. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And while Rinpoche takes his pictures, Bola, we really want to thank you. Just now you heard the applause. I purposely put my mic.
I didn't hear anything. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you heard the applause and the cheers. Now you cannot say, you cannot hear, right? So thank you, Bola. It's always you who delivers the exceptional translations that makes it so easy for us to digest and to be able to receive Rinpoche's actionable points, So it's all thanks to you. And, even with the screen, you can connect with all of us. So that's your special power. Huh? Thank you. Thank you, Bola. We wish you good health and long life. Please continue to benefit all beings everywhere. Thank you. So friends, let's celebrate together in appreciation.
Delivery.
Yes.
Where's delivery?
Where's my cake?
It's delivery. Okay, Rinpoche. So now Mari say we invite Rinpoche to cut the cake. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Rinpoche. Rinpoche first cake ever cut. His birthday cake was his first trip when he came to Singapore. Yes, that was in celebration of Rinpoche's 40th birthday. Now it's 3 years already. Okay, so friends, there is the pandan cake, banana walnut mini muffin, as well as rosemary chicken in cranberry sauce. Rosemary chicken. No. Yeah, that one, the tartlet. The tartlet is rosemary chicken, not cake. Rosemary chicken in the tartlet with cranberry sauce. And then the pandan cake and then the mini banana walnut. Yeah, Rinpoche, you will have the mango lassi. Monks can mango lassi, yeah. Because we first time mango lassi cake. So we check. Oh, Kishla. Yeah. Bola. What you say? Where's your cake? Oh no, it's my bed. Yes.
I can handle it. No cake to me.
Yeah. Next, Bola. Yeah, Rinpoche. Kishla also, huh? Maybe y'all can cut for the monks. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, friends, for also attending today our final graduating class from Khari Rinpoche's Purification series. We always rejoice with all our students, our classmates, and all our friends to come together for Dharma classes because it is a very rare group of friends who gather together, willing to invest time, energy, and effort to come to classes. And this is a group of friends that we really treasure at the Dharma Center as well, because we need to have this group growing. Otherwise, if we don't come to teachings, we never know how to improve ourselves and to become better versions of ourselves. So all of your attendance, your presence in the classes are also inspiration for other people, when they cannot get to have the conditions to come to class. But sometimes when they look at our pictures and they think, how come this group of people can have the time to come? So I think it gives them some space to think that they could be in this kind of position also. But of course, sometimes it's condition limitations that restricts us. But I think a lot of time also we have to carve out that time ourselves. We have to find that interest and gather that genuine interest enough to want to learn, to want to be able to invest that time in Dharma learning. So I rejoice for all of you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for joining our classes.